It's finally here. This 6 weeks leading up to this tournament felt a lot longer than the 6 weeks leading up to the last tournament. Does it feel that way to you too?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Maybe it has something to do with the seasons changing. So now
Hmm.
we're going in really from winter into summer. I didn't feel like there was anything in between, at least on the East Coast of the United States. That's what it felt like. So it's really nice to be finally talking about this May tournament, and yeah, sumo really heating up. This is the time of year that I think is the most exciting to be watching sumo. Something about the summer tournaments I think just feels really special.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about this one. I mean, there's certainly going to be a lot less sumo last time, at least on day one, simply because of all of the injuries that have already been accounted for. Not to mention, some of the guys that are going to be probably not at 100% or even 75%, but we can get into that in just a little bit. So we are just about 48 hours away from the start of the May tournament, and our defending champion, unfortunately, it was I don't even know if I can call it a bittersweet victory for Terunofuji last time because I mean he did in his rookie appearance what some people never do in a lifetime, and that is win the grand tournament, and he won't even be available to defend it.
Yeah, I think if we remember from the last tournament, there was a chance that he wasn't going to be able to compete on that final day, and it would have been out of his hands whether or not he was able to defend his lead and potentially win it out. Now, it didn't end up coming to that because I think it was Onosato and Hoshoryu were the others that were possibly going to take that spot. They ended up not getting the requisite wins to force a playoff. So Takeru Fuji being available on the final day didn't make the difference. But there was that concern when we saw him, take a pretty serious hit where we thought he would be out for the last days of the last tournament, and he showed up and then of course won it against all odds. So, it was really a special moment, but I think there were certainly signs that this could happen. I'm just grateful that he was able to get the victory before the injury, obviously. But as we know, injuries are such a rampant problem in the sport, and not even a problem that's likely to go away anytime soon. The only way I really see the injuries going away is if the tournaments are less frequent. But this is just the way it's got to be, I suppose. And he's going to come back all the better for it. So it should still be a pretty exciting tournament. Onosato is still going to be in, of course, at the Komusubi level, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking for, I mean, the fact that he's already there, and I'm pretty sure that his first tournament it was either May or July of last year. So for him to already be here, like it really is a sign that he is the next, big thing in sumo. And it's why, we'll talk about in a little bit, but he is one of my top three picks to win it all this year. There are three people that I think can win this tournament. Uh, and we'll discuss that at length, but he is firmly one of those three, especially given the absences we've seen.
I agree. And a very, very important note about Onosato that's really giving him a lot of that strength is his new top knots. That is
Ah,
going to be
yes.
huge. Seeing him fighting in the top knot, almost didn't recognize him, but it was very cool to see. It really feels like now he's no longer one of the newbies. He's in there in the Sanyaku ranks with the top knot, ready to potentially get himself a Yusho.
Yeah, I'm excited to there's always something like rebellious about seeing somebody just like with the hair down when they step into the dohyo. Yeah, maybe it's because that's how it was in the TV show Sanctuary, which you still haven't watched, but it's all right. You'll come around.
I'll get around to it one of these days.
All right. So let's why don't we do what we love to do and just start from the top and work our way through.
Absolutely. So, beginning with our Kachi Clash.
Yes, of course. So we'll take a look at Kachi Clash and also, just kind of discuss the top Sanyaku guys. So we have Terunofuji, he seems to just want to give it a go and see how many days he can go before having to withdraw. Maybe if he manages to start off like 3-1 like he did back in January, he'll try to go through, the entire week. I mean, and I personally think he's gonna do maybe like 4 days, go 1-3, and then just call it a month, and then rinse and repeat,
Of
until
course.
he's feeling healthy again.
I definitely feels like the his participation in this tournament and maybe even the last one was almost in lieu of like a rehab. This seems like he's participating in the tournaments to get some experience and get himself kind of loosened up, but that this tournament isn't necessarily his return, so to speak. It's sort of interesting that it feels that way, but honestly, in the four matches he competed in last tournament, it didn't feel like he was giving 100%. It felt very different than a few tournaments ago where he won it and he came in on the first day and just every match he was bullying people and throwing them around. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that at the beginning of this tournament also, where he doesn't seem to be at full strength, and it's almost an inevitability that he's going to withdraw, just a matter of how many days in. It's also worth noting that in this tournament, hardly anyone is picking Terunofuji in their Kachi Clash, probably for the reasons that we just discussed.
Oh, I haven't
But
even looked at what other people are picking, but that does not surprise me in the slightest.
yeah, it seems based on the way the last one went. But it's worth pointing out that in the tournament that he won and crushed people in, very few people had picked him then either. So, sometimes he can surprise us. We're not really ever sure which Teru we're gonna get, but I'm gonna go with the safer pick myself, and I'm gonna go with the next person we can talk about here, which is Hoshoryu.
All right. So I was fit as far as our Ozeki ones, I was 50-50 split on Hashoryu and the newly dubbed Kotozakura. But why don't you tell me why you're loving Hoshoryu this month?
It's honestly, it feels more about momentum for me. I just feel like Koto Zakura, formerly known as Koto no Waka, we're going to now use his correct preferred name, Koto Zakura. Um, I feel like he's been on this endless rise and incline that just to me feels like it has to at some point slow down a bit. I mean, if you look at anybody's records in the Makuuchi division, rarely do you consistently win 10 plus 10, 11, 12 wins every single tournament. At some point the shoe has to drop. So in last tournaments I predicted the same thing and I was dead wrong. I had Kurishima and few people had Hoshoryu last tournament, to be fair, but I did not pick then Kotonowaka at the time, and I was dead wrong about him. I thought that he would have his drop off in his first tournament at Ozeki. I just think it has to happen at some point, surely. Um, so and then also I have the feeling that Hoshoryu had a spell of being very disappointing and not really living up to the heights that we know he can reach. But the last tournament, I think, showed us, especially with the absence of Terunofuji for most of the last tournament, showed us that Hoshoryu has that drive to be that strongest Ozeki, especially when Terunofuji isn't breathing down his neck. I think he can do it again. So if Teru is out, I think Hoshoryu is likely to have the best record.
Yeah, it's a sensible pick, and it felt like a coin flip to me, but ultimately I felt a slight edge for newly dubbed Kotozakura, for a number of reasons. One of which is that he hasn't had a losing record in about 2 years, I think. Which to be fair, Hoshoryu hasn't either. But I think what's more important to me is just the math. The math really favors Kotozakura because if you look at his last tournament, he went 10-5, and four of the five guys that he lost to are currently either not participating or are going to be fighting hurt. He lost to Takerufuji and Asanoyama. Both of them are out. He also lost to Takakeisho and Kirishima. Both of them are nursing injuries. And he lost to Ura, which was kind of just his, random, wasn't quite prepared for that one. So when you look at it like that, like that's a potential, like that could wind up being like a two-win flip that could really push him over the top and into that first Yokozuna rope run. So that's why he is my pick in the Yokozuna Ozeki rankings for this month.
It's a great point. And I think also again if you look at the picks across the board in Kachi Clash, it is about a 50-50 split between these two. The two people that are not getting any picks from anybody are Takakeisho and Kirishima. Why is that?
But well, with Takakeisho, it's just because of his health. I mean, he got his, he cleared his Kadoban last time, which kind of gives you the indication that he won't, that like he'll feel comfortable like bowing out at some point this tournament and then just trying to save his energy to get 8 wins the next one. Like he's all at the point where he's just going to be roller coastering the rest of his career unless he chooses to get some kind of surgery. That's with Takakeisho. As for Kirishima, I think people are understandably afraid of him based on his last few outings. Like he really has just not impressed as an Ozeki, even though he has had the only 13-2 record by an Ozeki in the past few in I think over a year he's the only one to go 13-2. But like when he first got it, he went 6-9, then he had a middling 9-6, then he won that U show in last November. Then he had a respectable 11-4 that saw him get yeeted by by Terunofuji, and then he was fighting hurt. So it's like until we really figure out what the heck is going on with Kirishima, is it just is he kind of that Takakeisho like Ozeki where, he sort of belongs in this rank but can't really step it up a notch? I think that's what has people scared.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I think most of the time when people are making their picks specifically in this category, it's really all about what have you done for me recently.
Hmm.
It's not, do you have the potential to be a great in the next couple years? Have you been great in the last couple years? It's what have you done in the last, say, two tournaments? And Kirishima, it seemed like ever since the final two matches of the November tournaments, seems like he's just on a downward decline until proven otherwise. But you know what? If Kirishima ends up winning 12 in this tournament, you can guarantee a lot of people are going to be picking him in the next one. Just we have
Oh
to see
yeah, I
that
mean
first.
if he gets, if he gets even 11, I think people will be back on the hype train in July. No
Yeah.
doubt.
And speaking of hype train, let's get into the next category
All
where we
right.
have really only three eligible options between the Sekiwake and Komusubi ranks because of an Asanoyama Kyujo
Hmm.
injury. So we have Wakamoto Haru, Abi, and Onosato. Such a strong division here. It's admittedly a very small division now with the only three people in these two ranks. But who do you have in these?
The good about it being a very small pool is that, if you're one of the ones who is that like if any of the other guys don't do as well, you're gonna feel like an idiot, because it's like you have an automatic, like 1 in 3 chance of getting like the best guy right in this one. So, I'm personally going with Onosato. I haven't seen who anybody in this particular group who seems like they can, they have like a higher ceiling than him for this particular tournament. And it's very likely that Onosato is going to go up against a injured Terunofuji, and he could, kick off his Sanyaku run by knocking off a Yokozuna, which would be so massive for his confidence. So he seems like the safe pick. He's the guy I'm gonna go with. I don't think I don't think that Abi, or as World of Sumo likes to refer to him as, uh the arms and legs with a man somewhere in the middle. I don't think he's really long for the Sekiwaki ranks, but I mean, because yeah, he's only been in this spot I think for 2 Basho in his entire career, and it's a long career. So yeah, I think his ceiling is more in like the high Maegashira. So he'll probably go like 6-9, maybe even 5-10 from this spot.
Yeah, it's I agree. I think that it's just a bit above where he belongs. This is something
Mhm.
we talk about all the time is there are some people who they get a great record and then they move up to somewhere where they just don't belong, and they're just inevitably going to be sent back down, and then they do well when they're lower and they come back up, those certain people. And then you have people like, say, Takakeisho, who belong as Ozeki but maybe don't really belong as a Yokozuna. They're not likely to consistently get the kind of quality that you'd expect to keep ranking up. So I think Abi is probably someone who belongs in the high M's, but probably not necessarily in the Sanyaku. For me, it was between Onosato and Wakamoto Haru, and I went
Mm-hmm.
with Wakamoto Haru, but
Mm.
I think they're both great choices. The way I see it, Onosato could have 12 wins or he could have six in this new role. Whereas for me, Wakamoto Haru here is just a safe bet for 8 or 9 wins. That's kind of the
No,
way
he
I saw it.
Wakamoto Haru is definitely a safe pick, and I don't, I'm not going to mock you or anybody else who is sort of who is ready to, step off the Onosato hype train right now. Because I mean, Wakamoto Haru is just such a proven commodity at the Sekiwake ranks. Like he's been a Sekiwake, I think, for all but one of the tournaments we've watched since we started watching last year. And, his records have all been solid, 9 wins here, 10 wins there. He had that one bad tournament in November, but he immediately followed it up by being one of only two people to knock off Terunofuji when he was going, Tyrannosaurus Rex mode. So, yeah, he's a safe pick. I think Onosato for me just feels like more of like a gut check pick.
Yeah, and I think I'm definitely still on the Onosato hype train, and I would say I would love to see him get those 12 wins. That would be amazing to watch. But yeah, so to your point about Wakamoto Haru's consistency, when he was in the Sekiwake ranks in his last 5 tournaments in Sekiwake, he had 9 or 10 wins in all but one of them. In one, he had only six. So that's a pretty safe bet to say that you're likely to get your 9 or 10 points in Kachi Clash that way. So for me it was, but I would love to see Onosato do it. That would be so exciting, just like the last tournament was, because that would also further establish, a talking point that we made a lot last tournament, that this is really the beginning of a new era for some new names to be taking over the sumo world, and that's something we've been looking for. So for Onosato to have double digit wins, and Koto Zakura have double digit wins and Hoshoryu double digit, it feels like the time is really coming that someone is going to take over that Yokozuna position, and that we're just seeing a new generation taking over. So I would love that.
It would be nice. All right, so now we go into the sort of tougher areas to really make your picks.
Yeah.
So for the Maegashira 1 through 5 ranks, we have our picks between, I'll just say their names real quick: Atami Fuji, Hirata Umi, Takayasu, Oho, Onosho, Daieisho, Gonoyama, Tobizaru, Ura, and Meisei. Why don't
Yes.
we both say who our picks were at the same time and see if we both got it right,
I have a
or if we
feeling we
both picked the same?
I have a feeling we did, but there's a lot of options here, so let's see how it goes.
Okay, on three. One, two, three, Daieisho.
Takayasu. Oh,
Oh, okay.
interesting. So I'm always very nervous about picking anyone in the top few,
Hmm.
M1, M2, M3, M4, because of just the run that they get. But if there's one person who I believe who the one person I can trust the most against Sanyaku, it's Takayasu in the last several tournaments. I just
Mm.
feel like even though his records aren't sublime, he just tends to beat those Sanyaku opponents and oftentimes loses to the people you would kind of be surprised by. So that's why I went with Takayasu there, but I think Daishu is a very good alternative pick. Those two probably would be the top two choices.
Yeah, I did consider Takayasu a bit. I mean, he just has the veteran savvy, and I think he's in, what's called the Joy, the top 5 or 6 in the Makuuchi ranks. And is probably just more technically sound than a lot of the other guys that are up there right now. But I just kind of feel that Daisho is going to do what Wakamoto Haru did back in January, which is kind of just storm right back up to Sekiwake, or at least Komusubi. Like, I feel like with his experience, he's going to be able to handle his own, pretty well against, the exact same people that Takayasu is going to be going up against, and he's probably going to face Terunofuji within 1 or 3 days. So if he can get that win, that would be huge for him. And I think he's going to be primed to get a lot of early momentum. So that's why I think he's the guy. And of course, it could also be a Tommy Fuji's time to shine. You never know.
It I would love that as well. That would be really exciting for him. I think it's very possible that Atami Fuji can do it now. His last time that he was in this position at M1, he had a 6-9 record. It wasn't super impressive, but he's so new to the division. With each tournament, he's really just learning more and more about how to compete at this level and who he's up against, which is so important to acknowledge, especially if you're putting him in the same bracket as someone like Takayasu, who's been around for so long, being in that same category. Part of what Takayasu has that others here don't yet is knowing who he's fighting. He can look across the ring and see someone like Midori Fuji, who he's been competing against for several years, and understand what he's up against, whereas Tommy Fuji might not have that yet. So with each passing tournament, I think Tommy Fuji makes his case that much stronger. I could absolutely see that one. The one thing I'll point out, I might actually be changing my picks because when I look at Takayasu's history in the last 2 years, he's had some excellent records, but never really this high up in the ranks.
Hmm.
So it might just not be where he belongs at this stage of his career. Maybe Daieisho or maybe even Atami Fuji might be a safer bet for anyone who's listening. I might take back my confidence in Takayasu there.
Yeah, and like there's still time. Like if there's more injuries that happen, like that really might influence things based on, oh, he's not going to be matched up against, this particular person who always gives him trouble. That could, be a +1 to him. So there's all kinds of math and metric that you gotta keep an eye on when you're playing Kachi Clash.
Absolutely.
So let us now move to the fourth tier, which is M6 through M10. No Takeru Fuji, so we have just 9 to pick from. I'll just list them off real quick. We have Nishikigi, Takanosho, Tamawashi, Shonanumi, Midori Fuji, Mitakeumi, Kotoshoho, Shodai, and Kinbozan. Once again, why don't we quickly say who we are picking and see if we both pick the same one?
All right.
On three. 1, 2, 3.
Midori
Shonanumi.
Fuji.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. We're going exact opposites, basically.
Yes.
I think I know why you're going with Midori Fuji, but please tell me.
For the same reasons I mentioned before about Takayasu, I feel that Midori Fuji is just someone who can beat the higher ranked fighters. He tends to struggle a bit. He just has those matches where you would expect him to win and he doesn't. But he has a good track record against those higher ranked people that he's going to face at some point. But I think M6 is a more comfortable spot for him. I would have loved to see Midori Fuji competing at, say, M10 like Shonana Umi, who you mentioned, because I think the run that he would get would give him a very good chance of having a strong, maybe, double digit record in this tournament. I'll say this was probably the toughest one to call for me because I just felt like I had such a similar feeling for so many of the people in this division. I thought Kinbozan would have been a great choice as well. Shonana Umi was one of the ones I was also strongly considering. That might have been my second or third choice there. But I just ended up going with, the experience, the expertise, and the ability to defeat some of the tougher guys, I think can really benefit Midori Fuji. When in doubt, I'll tend to pick the person who's been a more consistent, reliable set of hands in recent tournaments. So
Oh, come
yeah,
on. You can admit it. You just like Midori Fuji because he's smaller than all the other guys.
you
And you like
got
the
me.
underguy.
You
You like
got
the
me.
underdog.
It's amazing. It's amazing watching him wrestle, honestly, at that size.
Yeah, I mean like man, that fight against Tokuseiho where he just like body slams a guy who's a full foot taller than him just never stops being awesome.
It,
For me, like going with Shonano Umi, it really just came down to like, where he was ranked relative to like who he's going up against. Like it just kind of feels like when he hits like the double digits in Maegashira that he's sort of in his element and more capable of getting like those 9 to 10 wins like he got when he first made the jump last year.
I think in these divisions, picking the person who has the lower rank is usually the smartest bet.
Hmm.
When you're in these bottom two categories, the M6 through M10 and the M11 through M17, typically the best pick is going to be the person with the lowest ranking just because of the run that they'll get if they're a strong competitor. So you're probably right to go with Shonano Umi. That was one of my top choices. Or Kinbozan, I think, is also a good one. Midori Fuji, gotta admit, I just love the guy. I'm kind of rooting for him more than actually expecting to get the most points that way. So yeah. But we'll see what happens. You never know. I mean, Midori Fuji has had excellent runs at this position in the past, so it could happen again. But probably the safer bets would be one of those guys in the M10 spot.
Now it does bear mentioning my initial pick at this spot was Nishikigi, because like he really seems to be like in the zone when he's in like the M ranks. Like he's been awful at Komusubi, which is probably why he had never been there until like about a year ago, even though he's been in sumo forever. Um, but I just kind of feel that Shonan Omi maybe has sort of a higher ceiling, especially that he's also a little bit younger, I think. I need to double check, but I'm pretty sure that Shonan Umi is only like 27, and so he's got a lot less. Oh, not even. He's only 26. So yeah, he just seems like a guy who has a higher ceiling, especially with that massive body of his. Like, with the right coaching and the right technique, he could really become like a major force somewhere down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think he's a great choice.
All right, and the final section to go through. This was the toughest part for me to deal with. So we have M11 through M17, which is Satonumi, Ichi Yamamoto, Mitoryu, Ryuden, Toki Hayate, Tomokaze, Tsurugisho, Hokuto Fuji, Nishiki Fuji, Churanumi, Oshoma, Roga, and Takara Fuji. Uh, this is the section where literally anything can happen, but I had a method to the madness that I used in order to come to my pick. Who do you have coming out of this section?
So in the past several tournaments, the best pick, the most popular one has been the newcomer with
Hmm.
the excellent rank the excellent run in Juryo coming up. It was Ichi Yamamoto and then Onosato and then Takeru Fuji, and all of those were excellent picks at the time that they came out, and they seem pretty obvious as someone who is just gonna blow away competition at M17 or M16 coming into it. This time, I don't think we're really gonna get that from the newly promoted wrestlers. And there's one person to me who stands out as being ranked far too low for their ability, who I think is almost a lock to get at least 8 or 9 wins, if not double digits. And for me, that's
Hmm.
Hokuto Fuji. The
Hokuto
last
Fuji.
the last two times that he's been ranked this low, sorry, the last three times that he's been ranked in the M double digits, he's had double digit wins.
Hmm.
So over a year ago when he was at M9, he had a Junyu show, a 12-3 record.
Hmm.
The previous time was a year before that, he was at M8 and he had 10 wins. Another year before that, and he was at M12, he had 11 wins. So the way I see it, and we were just mentioning this before about people who just, are ranked in the right spot or the wrong spot. I think this is a situation where Hokuto Fuji is ranked way below his ability. I think his comfortable spot is somewhere in the high M's, probably a little bit under Sanyaku. And I think for him competing at M11, he's a lock to me to get 9, 10 wins. So
I can
that's
see
my
where you're
pick.
coming from with that. My like, and I did consider that as well. I went with the rookie Oshoma, who even though there was a scandal involving him potentially being a massive bully within the Naruto stable, and not punished for it. Like I think the trend of like newly promoted guys who were great the in Jorio before making the jump to Maegashira is going to continue, and the sort of options this time were either Oshoma or Mitoryu, and I just think Oshoma has like that sort of that wow factor that particularly at this level opens him up to like a 9, 10, maybe even potential 11 wins if he like can get some really good matchups in the first week. But I do see where you're coming from with Hokuto Fuji. The reason I wouldn't have picked Hokuto Fuji is just because he had that injury in
Yes.
January, and anybody who is like, even who had a losing record right off an injury, is someone that I'm just so, iffy on. Like, if he had gone like 8-7 after having that injury in January, I might have been willing to pick him. But I mean, he started like, what was this, 1-7, and before getting just like a bunch of guys that weren't in it anymore, and he still wound up going only 6-9. So yeah, maybe he'll get 8-7, but I just think the ceiling for Oshoma's a little higher.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And I think that's something just worth mentioning to our audience when it comes to sumo, because in sumo, unlike some other sports, there seems to be extra incentive to compete through injury that maybe doesn't exist in other sports, because your salary, your your standing, your career, so much of it is tied to whether you compete regardless of whether you're healthy enough to compete. A lot of times as fans, especially doing something like Kachi Clash, we're forced to make that decision trying to pretending to be doctors, those of us who aren't doctors, that is, um, trying to assess from what we've seen in the ring and the little bits we get as far as reporting goes. Do we think this is a matter of their ability or a matter of injury? Do we think they're likely to be coming back and competing at their best or something close to it? Or are they going to be severely handicapped by their, existing condition, whatever it is? So that's the kind of decision we got to make all the time. And yeah, Hokuto Fuji, definitely understand why that's on your radar right now. But the way I see it, the fact that in the second half of the last tournament he did have 5-2 in the last 7 matches, to me says that whatever it was, if he managed to get 5 out of 7 wins against anyone in the Makuuchi division in that last tournament, whatever he was dealing with, hopefully 45 days later, he should be well enough from to have a strong showing at the M11 position. That's kind of where I'm thinking. But who knows? He could end up being Kyujo after a few days. Wouldn't be too shocking. And I hope we don't see that, but you never know.
You never know. All right, so I think it is time to make our stone cold lock it in pick to win the entire tournament. Who do you got?
Well, I completely agree on the top three choices. I think Kotozakura, Onosato, and Hoshoryu are definitely the three most likely to win it. I'm going with my pick in the top division. I'm going with Hoshoryu.
Okay. And I'm going to go with Kotozakura. I think that, this is his time. I think that, the stars are aligning in a way that can really allow him to go 13-2, maybe even 14-1, if things break a certain way by week 2. And yeah, I think, I'm hoping that we see a rope run in July, that somebody is ready to like seriously challenge for the position of Yokozuna next tournament. So that is it for the tournament, but we're not quite done with the podcast yet, because we do have to take just a couple of moments to talk about the American sumo icon himself, Akebono. Uh, so Akebono, of course, the 64th Yokozuna, who tragically passed away after many, many years of severe health issues. Passed away at only 54 years of age, which, which is understandably understandably hard to wrap your head around, someone, dying that relatively young. Now you're not too familiar with Akebono, are you?
No, I have a general knowledge of, his accomplishments and the era that he competed in. I think the number one thing that stood out to me about Akebono that I did know was that he was the first non-Japanese yokozuna, and by extension the first American slash Hawaiian yokozuna in the sport. So that I thought was a really interesting fact, because I also know that in recent history, most yokozuna have not been Japanese. So I thought it was very curious that Akebono ushered in that era of non-Japanese yokozuna, to then be followed by so many Yokozuna that were not, most of them being Mongolian, I believe, just about a majority, and another Hawaiian, Samoan Yokozuna as well. So I think that's a really special thing. You love to see kind of ceilings being broken in sports, and that was certainly one that Akebono did. And then, of course, the point about his age at passing is always interesting when you're thinking about that in the greater context of athletes, especially athletes of this size and this lifestyle, and the kind of implications that could be there. But yeah, I mean, seemed like just a really special legacy, and I think a really important one for the era of sumo that we're in now, where you have competitors from all kinds of places that you would never expect competing in the great sport.
I will say, yeah, very well said. I will say this for Akebono. I knew who he was before I knew anything else about sumo because he did that whole shtick with with the big show at WrestleMania 22 about
That's
18 years ago.
that's right. That must
Yeah.
be where I had heard the name. That is so funny.
But
Yeah,
like more than that, like he wasn't just representing, sumo in the United States. When Japan hosted the Nagano Winter Olympics in 1998, he was the guy that they had do the ceremonies to welcome in the competition. And they could have chosen Takanohana to do that, or even Wakanohana, because I'm pretty sure he had been promoted to Yokozuna by that point. So the fact that they chose the American Yokozuna to represent the sport of sumo in their pre-game celebrations, it really sort of showed uh what like where the sport was and the kind of people that Japan was allowing to finally represent it after centuries of relative, like, let's be honest, relative isolation, as far as letting outsiders even participate in their sport. And as you mentioned, since Akebono, all but three of the Yokozuna that have been promoted since Akebono have been either American or Mongolian. And I think the sad part is probably that Akebono and Musashi Maru will probably both be the last Americans that ever become Yokozuna, because the had the financial opportunity to play football been as pronounced in the 80s as it is now, I think both of them would have gone with football or even like tried basketball or something rather than the intense lifestyle that sumo offers. All that is to say, rest in peace, Akebono, a 10-time, wait, let me make sure I have my numbers right. A 10-time, no, an 11-time Makauchi championship winner. He won 4 tournaments in the 1993 year. He only missed, let's see, only missed 8 full tournaments after reaching Yokozuna, which is something, excuse me, I'm sure that Terunofuji wishes he could have only had to do. Had a fairly long career at Yokozuna. He was promoted at the age of about 26 and, had a nice 7-year run at the position. He had either a first or second, had at least two first or second place finishes in almost every year of his run at Yokozuna. And, he went out on top. Within his final tournament, he goes 14-1, wins the tournament, and, retires as one of the all-time greats. So, rest in peace, Akebono. There will certainly never be another Akebono again.
absolutely. But to your point, to bring it back also to this upcoming tournament, uh, a a Yokozuna winning and then retiring after their final tournament, is that something that is on the table in this tournament for Terunofuji to do? I mean, he is set to compete, and the last time that he was set to compete, and people weren't really expecting him to do well. He ended up going 13-2. Could we see a tenth U show for Terunofuji and a prompt retirement afterwards?
Well, I have no doubt that he will retire the moment he secures his 10th U show. It's been his dream for a long time, also because there are certain perks that come with getting 10 career titles. Um so if he finds a way to pull out this title, I think he will announce his retirement. That said, I don't think it's going to happen this one. It could happen in one of the last three, like if he if he pulls out, then sits out in July, I could totally see him coming back in September or November and, riding off into the sunset with his 10th title, and it's kind of what I hope for him as well.
Yeah, no, that would be great as well. Well, we're gonna find out in just a couple of days. It's been a pleasure doing this as always. Everybody, make sure to lock in your Kachi Clash picks while you still have a chance, and we'll see how that goes as well.
Take care, everybody. Hakioi.
Hakyoi!